Welcome to the world of data center innovation with the iMasons podcast, discovering the people leading our industry revolution. My name is Roman Truncheon, and today I'm joined by Rich Kenny, Managing Director at InteractDC. Rich has agreed to talk about the IT side of our industry and the upcoming legislations, as well as the impact on our facilities. So let's get right into it. Well, first of all, Rich, welcome to the podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, man. It's good to speak to you.
So for the listeners that may not know you, do you mind going through an introduction of yourself and maybe what Interact does?
Yeah, no worries. So my name's Rich Kenny. I'm the Managing Director at Interact. We specialise in circular economy and environmental reporting, maintenance and management of data centres from the IT and equipment side of things. So a bit of a different approach to data centre management than the majority of businesses who are looking at buildings. We look at the IT, the optimizations and the art of possible on that side of things.
That's definitely going to be a different discussions to everything we've seen, potentially within iMasons as well, where most of the listeners might be on the data center side. We've heard a lot about all of the legislations that are coming through for the buildings, the power utilizations, the efficiencies, and all the different things that are coming with it. I assume the same is true for IT. Do you mind unpacking that for us a little bit?
Yeah, there's some quite serious legislation coming now, driven by sort of actions in the EU that are focused on IT, and it's probably the first time that IT focus is moving to the forefront a little bit. So whereas historically it's been report on the building, report on the facility, report on external factors, now there's a shift towards what's inside, what's covering the white space, and how do we define what good looks like. And I think this is the first time that there's been a really grown-up conversation around how do we know what good looks like, and then how do we get towards that. And that is new. There's a little bit of cloudiness around it because there's a couple of key metrics which are defined, and the capture and presenting of those metrics is quite clear. But then there's a little bit of a woolly area around some of the other aspects, such as storage, networking, and sort of data in and out, really, which is, I think, also really important, but not as well defined right now.
So you're saying that there's a number of metrics out there. What are the key ones? What are the things that people will have to focus on maybe at first until the rest comes into force?
So the big one really is understanding the large energy users, which is the servers. So storage and networking play a big role in data center energy usage, but the majority is coming from the servers themselves. And that's especially true as we move into the AI era, where there's GPU-enabled sleds that are massively energy consumptive. The initial reporting is not going to be on GPUs, but is going to be on the central processing units, the CPU-led architecture, so the x86 systems. And that's what's in the majority of data centers right now. So the focus is on how good the general servers are performing, and that's based on a metric called ITEE, or IT energy efficiency. And then the kind of comparable metric that then says how well you're using that equipment is ITEU, or IT energy utilization. So the key metrics are how good is the kit you've got, ITEE, and how efficiently and effectively are you using it from a 0 to 100% utilization point of view, and that's ITEU. So the key metrics we're dealing with are those two, and they relate to servers. What have you got and how good is it, and how well are you using it in regards to, are you barely using it? Is it idle? Are you using it at maximum, or using it somewhere in between? And those two are going to tell the story of the next probably 2 or 3 years regards IT and equipment utilization and effectiveness.
So it's going to be an interesting journey, and with those metrics very similar to what we've seen in the data center industry for PUE and other metrics that have been going through and being widely recognized and accepted. What do you think is going to happen when we start seeing those numbers? Any wide predictions out there if things might change and look different?
Yeah, I think so. I think the main one we're going to see is providing this transparency on ITEE will be a first time that co-locators, that main sort of enterprise data centers are going to be looking at what they're providing in a use of transaction per watt metric. So no one before has ever looked at ITEE properly and gone, how good is what I've got? Because there isn't a defined sort of method for what good looks like. We at Interact have a grading scale. We grade it a server like a fridge from A to F, and we say A is good, F is bad, and basically we assign a metric of ITE from that A to F. The reason we do that is because it makes it very simple to bucket up your servers into those ones that probably shouldn't be used anymore and the ones that we should use better. So utilization has kind of been something that has been looked at for a few years. And you used to have a lot of conversations around zombie servers, idle servers, are they being used? The key thing there is an inefficient server at high utilization is still a bad decision. So the first step needs to be understanding, is what I'm using good? Is it fit for purpose? And we see variance in data centers of, 300 to 400 times less efficient kit being used. So we see like low grade, F grade servers being used fairly efficiently, but they do fundamentally no work per unit of electricity. So they do nothing and they use loads of energy to do it, but they're well used. And that's where the interplay comes in. We need to understand, are we getting a good return on investment for energy to actions? And that's what ITEE is going to provide. That energy efficiency number is going to say, is this server good at doing work? And if not, we then have a whole raft of choices to transform it. So do we replace it? Do we upgrade it? Do we reconfigure it? Do we retire it? There's going to be a whole load of sort of actions that can come off the back of understanding where we are now. So I think the big step will be finding that baseline and saying, is what we've got good and fit for purpose? And if not, what we're going to do about it? And creating 3 and 5 year plans to significantly improve that return on investment. The downside of that is, as you make the IT more efficient, it knocks other areas in the data center. So a data center is a system of systems. The second you make the IT more efficient, the PUE gets worse. Because all of a sudden the one of the PUE is lower, but the cooling overhead then needs to be adapted, adjusted, and changed to then balance that. So it's this constant step change of environment and IT that needs to go hand in hand. So identify how good your equipment is, get your ITE figure, put a plan in place on how you're going to improve that, and then you need to readdress your PUE because you're going to be overcooling more efficient equipment than it needs to be. And that way your PUE is going to get worse. You then adjust that then changes your water usage effectiveness, your carbon usage effectiveness. All these are different metrics. They're all interrelated and they all play together. But it does start with the IT rather than facility. And that's not what we've done before. It's always been, how do you make the building the best it possibly can be to serve the IT? Now it's, how do we make sure we're using the right IT in the right way? And then the building facilitates the efficiencies around that. So it's a very different approach to data center management.
So we see, and thanks for unpacking this, because we've seen that divide, facilities versus IT, for a long while. I think it's the first time we really start seeing IT under the cloche of, reporting efficiency metrics. They were mostly under uptime metrics. The efficiency metrics came in the data center space 20 odd years ago, and we've seen vast improvements. Now we're going to see the same side on the IT. Do you think that has a chance of breaching that divide, IT versus facilities, and see that getting a lot closer?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think what we need to change our mindset to is, how efficiently are we providing a service? And that service is a digital service. It's a transaction. How well are we providing the customer's return on investment from a cost point of view for them doing work? And it's the first time where we're not going to say, how good are we at efficiently cooling your kit? It's going to be, how good are we at serving a transaction? And that requires the interplay of facilities and the interplay of IT, because they're going to need to work together to maximize those efficiencies. The advantage is we've got additional stakeholders in this now. One of the key ones being Planet Earth, where we're going to say, am I getting good return on investment from a cost point of view, but am I getting a good return on investment for my energy? And is my energy getting a good return on investment from the carbon required? So there's this whole interplay now between how we buy, how we sell, how we refresh, and then how we look after and manage the equipment as well. So yeah, I think this is a well-needed wake-up call for the industry to start working cross-functionally like you would do in development. It used to be that before you had sort of cross-functional development teams, it would be the developer builds an app, then the business check if it does what they want, and then some guy comes and tests it, and then someone else decides if it's fit for purpose. And then what we ended up doing is building cross-functional teams in sort of methods of saying, is this right for the business? Have we gone about the right way? Are we testing it as we do it? Is it still fit for purpose? And you have this iterative development process. That's how I see the data center working, as an iterative process, not sling some kit in there, cool it as best we can, see you in 3 years. It needs to be, are we using the right stuff to do the right work in the right way? Are you guys cooling it okay? Have we got the right power agreements to purchase the right level of energy at the right price, at the right carbon input? Are we planning refurbishment, repair, ongoing maintenance? All these things need to play in together in how we provide that digital service. And that's the transformation from us in a data center industry being people who look after buildings to people who provide digital infrastructure. And that requires that cross-functional approach where we work so much better together than in little silos. If everyone works together and we kind of pull in and collaborate, we're going to transform the way we provide compute for our customers. And that's what's so crucial, is to take that holistic view and say, what does the customer, what does the world need? And if we work together, I think we can do incredible things, rather than going, that's not my bit, that's my bit. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's all our bit now.
You mentioned a number that for me was, and I didn't think it would be that much actually, when you said, well, this server is about 300 to 400 times less efficient than these other ones. This is nowhere near the sort of inefficiencies we saw in data centers in the first place to start with, when PUEs were 5, 6, 7, 8, and are now getting towards, an average of 1.6, 1.7 overall. And we're not talking about the most efficient ones here. But what I'm wondering is, once we've optimized all of this, the potential impact on the rest of the facility it could be huge.
Yeah.
Could you unpack that for us a little bit, the sort of scale that we can see once things are getting measured?
Yeah, I mean, at Interact, we've done about 400 data centers in the last 3 to 4 years. And on average, we see improvements in IT efficiency for our projects of between 65 and 80%. So we are seeing huge cost savings, huge carbon savings, huge energy savings by identifying those low performers and doing something about it via serious mechanisms. We've seen servers that are delivering 300 operations per watt constantly being used, and the ones that are available now are doing 14,000 ops per watt. So that is the capability. It's not 5 times better, 10 times better. It's 100 times better at doing work. So for one server, you can replace 100. That's the sort of level you're getting to from an energy use point of view. And because no one looks at this, these exist in every estate. It's so rare for us to not go into a customer and go, did you know there is 70% energy reduction capable on this application? There is a 90% available in this section here. And this isn't like 1 or 2 servers. These are in the thousands. And without that transparency, people just don't know, because like you said earlier on, it's all about performance. So it's always been about uptime management. The second you introduce any element of risk into IT, they go, I don't really want to get rid of these servers or move these apps because right now it's all okay. But if you can come in with a sustainability and cost-focused business case that says you could make that app 100 times more efficient just by changing the hardware, and it's costing you £6 million a year of wasted energy, there is then a reason to do it. And prior to that, there isn't, because you just introduce an element of risk, you introduce an element of concern where you go, we should probably do something about that, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Whereas now it's like, well, it actually is broke because it's costing the business millions, and it's costing the environment, and it's costing us from an energy point of view. And these efficiencies exist everywhere, and I mean everywhere. And it is a factor of sometimes 100. We did a project the other day, and the energy reduction on a subset of the estate was a 96% reduction to do the same work at the same utilization, just on better hardware, more suitable hardware. And it doesn't always mean newer and loads of capex investment. It can be reconfiguration, switching out CPUs, changing the RAM configurations. There's a million ways to skin that cat, and no one's looking at it. But the opportunities are like the first days of PUE. So your PUE 6, we think we can halve that by doing some very basic things down to 3. there isn't that diminishing returns in IT yet because no one's looking at it. So right now we have the single biggest opportunity to transform our data centers in the IT area. And this legislation, I think, will be the catalyst and the catapult to say, give me the numbers of where I am right now. My baseline is terrible. What do I want to do about it? Well, we can do twice the work for half the energy. Let's get 4 times better overnight. And we've seen that. We've seen businesses where it's literally moving VMs from one set of servers to another, and they're seeing a 70% energy reduction over a weekend. It's mad, the opportunity. And that's where we are right now. We're on the cusp of a massive opportunity. And it starts with knowing where we are, what the baseline looks like, and then moving from there.
That's an incredible story right there of being pinpointed as an industry that consumes the most energy, or one of the industry that consumes the most energy, and being able to say, well, by the way, we think that we overconsume by quite a margin. Can you take me through, if I was an IT director, VP of Information Technologies, what should I be looking at? At what point do I trigger a plan to review the IT estate? What does it take? What are the tell signs?
I think you look at it right now and you get someone to come in and tell you how well it's performing right now. So you do the hardware analysis piece and go, how good are all my configurations in my estate? Bucket them up into opportunities, which is like I said, we grade them, but there could be other mechanisms. And you look at it and go, that section there that has been graded Fs are our single biggest opportunity. What could that transform into? And it's relatively straightforward to then look at those buckets and go, it's 800 servers that are graded F, and 20 servers could do that work. So we have an opportunity to decommission 800 servers and replace them with 20. It's going to be a 98% energy reduction. The next step is then to look at what applications sit on those servers and what you can move, and what you can move simply, and what you can move in a straightforward manner. Because there'll be a stack within there, a stack of easy wins, and there'll be a stack of very difficult decisions to be made. And some of them might be like, well, we're not actually using any of these. We're just running updates. We can just move that work. Other ones are there's app dependencies and firmware issues, but they see it as a risk of moving, but there's a huge risk of doing nothing. Because the second you look at those apps and go, well, it's really hard to move from this Gen 3 server to this Gen 11, and you go, what happens when that Gen 3 server falls over and there's no spares, there's no repairment, no one's giving you a maintenance contract? They're literally sat there and you're hoping they don't break. And all you do is wake up every morning and pray that it doesn't fall over. That isn't a risk management strategy. That is a bury your head in the sand and make it the next CTO's problem and hope you just get through your tenure. So there's this element where we go, it's too risky to move it. It's like a lot of this stuff is way too risky to leave. And we see that. And then what you happen is someone goes, we're going to go to cloud. And you go, but okay, but now you're going to go to cloud. You still have to move all this stuff. And they go, yeah, well, now we're going to cloud. We're willing to move it. And it's like, well, why weren't you willing to move it 5 years ago when it would have saved your business millions? It could have saved thousands of tons of carbon. For an idea of just how much opportunity exists in the IT, I think we could reduce data center energy consumption by 40% if the IT was optimized globally. I think there's a 40% reduction in energy consumption to do the same work with better hardware, better suited hardware. It's not necessarily new or all the rest of it. It's just better suited. You're talking about like 1% of the world's electricity could just be consumption could just be removed. You could just dump 1% of the world's consumption because it's just waste in data centers. And I think if we don't get to the point where we do that, this is why there's an awful lot in the press about, data centers are big consumers, they cause problems. If someone really knew that like 40 or 50% of our energy use is waste by unoptimized IT, you kind of do deserve quite a lot of criticism when you know the stuff you can do about it. So understand that start point, get a baseline, figure out what good, bad, and indifferent looks like, and then make a plan to transform that and work with the DC operator to do it. Because we've had projects where we've saved them so much energy, they've had to get an energy broker to buy the excess because we've saved so much in such a short space of time that their purchase agreements mean that they're in breach because they've gone from 5 megawatts to 2. We've seen that through optimized IT. So you create problems when you do this, but you solve long-term problems.
Right,
and that's massively important.
Well, that's a very good segue into what I'd like to approach next. The integrations between IT and facilities has been, well, pretty standard and pretty segmented so far. As soon as we start optimizing IT, especially to the levels you're talking about it, that creates a knock-on effect on the facilities. I'd love you to start unpacking this for us. So impacts, but not only this, but also opportunities that then arise on the facility side because the IT side has been optimized. Could you take us through this?
Yeah, I think because you're going to build a comprehensive plan of how to do this. So it might be that if you can present what your IT estate looks like now and what it could look like in the future, it might decide whether you move to heat transfer. It might decide whether you're moving to liquid cooling to do, do heat distribution into whatever it is, whether it's swimming pools, schools, local communities, or whatever it is. There's a whole stack of metrics that require you to constantly optimize everything. But it starts with the one on the one of the PUE. 1 point whatever. The one is the IT, the point is the waste. When you're shifting the one down so much by 50-60%, you need to change the way you're cooling it. You need to change how your density in your racks is going to play. There's a whole load of decisions to be made that are facility-based decisions that all pile on additional benefit. Because you might go, there's no point doing liquid cooling on these, we don't need to. But if you replaced 800 racks with 50 racks, but the density of the racks was 5 times higher, it might make tons of sense to do a full liquid cooled rack and a heat reuse function. In which case, you're then dealing with other aspects, which is your PUE is going to come down, your water usage effectiveness is going to get better, your carbon usage effectiveness is going to get better, your energy reuse factor is going to improve. So there's all these other aspects of the DC reporting that get better when they're driven by that decision. But that decision might need to be made properly rather than just, we're going to move to liquid cooling. It's like, well, if you start liquid cooling the stuff you've already got, you're just kind of polishing a turd, basically. Because you're massively improving something that is unimprovable fundamentally. So yeah, this whole decision making, it all works together. It can't be done in isolation. It must be done together. But changing that one of PUE gives you the opportunity to transform your data center, because you're going to build a business case from an energy reduction and cost reduction point of view that will fund that transformation.
And I guess all of this is not purely applicable to enterprise data centers when the same company controls both the facilities and the IT. Can you take us through what happens in maybe colocation environments or environments that are a bit more segmented?
Yeah, I think enterprise, because they can do the joined up thinking, makes sense. The thing with the new legislation in Europe is that colos have to provide the energy efficiency information on their servers to the customers. And it's the first time we've seen colos having to care about what sits in their facility, because we've been doing this a long time. And whenever you come up to a colo, their response is always the same. It's not our tin, so we don't care. And it's like, okay, but capacity is your concern and efficiency is your concern. And part of that efficiency is the whole joint up piece. So for colo, it's very much about customers understanding where they are and then going to the colo for advice on what they should do next. And it's not going to be on what hardware to buy and how to provision it, but it will be around how they're going to accelerate the beneficial investment in IT that the enterprise is making. So for colo, they can bury their head in the sand if they want, but they're going to get a really rude shock when someone turns around and says, we're going to cut 50% of our space with you guys and our energy with you guys because we're optimizing. So you now need to fill the other half. And people are going to be kind of scratching their heads going, that means we need to reconfigure our facility, or we need to bring new customers in, or we need to. So if colos don't start working with enterprises to provide IT services, I think they're going to find themselves losing customers in droves. Or at least having a higher churn, because they're going to have to fill those racks faster to make sure they're still optimizing the rest of the facility. So I think the colo needs to start playing the role as an advisor and a partner to those customers rather than just a building management company. So there is a big change in how colo needs to be perceived in the market, I think.
When we've been talking a lot about the physical aspects of servers and the traditional sense of the IT stack. Does the same apply when we go to cloud? Is there different concerns or ways of looking at maybe a cloud infrastructure that could benefit from the same techniques of optimizations and therefore save on cost, energy, carbon, and so on?
Yeah, I think the big thing for cloud is you've got less control over the physical aspects of any of it. You can't improve your IT because you can't control the tin. Utilization in the hyperscale data centers is quite low. Everyone goes, oh, it's really high utilized, but your average utilization in AWS data centers is like 40%, which is better than most enterprises do with their own equipment, but it's still not, what everyone thinks it is. It's not everyone thinks that you go to Amazon, you're 80% utilization. No, you're still at 40 because you've got deduplication, you've got multiple sites, you've got the ability to scale straight away. To get all those benefits, you have to leave excess capacity. There's just no way around that. But with cloud, I think the key thing is understanding what your FinOps and GreenOps posture is. So a lot more with cloud management, a lot less control on what physical tin and the buildings you're using, and you have a lot more control over how you're providing services, how you're provisioning, and how you're optimizing resources. So it's a very similar approach. For me, I would look at what the highest energy users are in your, or highest cost users are in your cloud estate, and you do standard FinOps practice. Should this be powered on? Is it over provisioned? Am I using too much of this piece of equipment to do the job I need it to do? And in most cases, a good FinOps strategy is a significant decrease in cost and decrease in carbon for the business. So for cloud, I think a lot of people have kind of said it's in cloud, as long as the costs are acceptable, we're okay. But a grown-up FinOps strategy or GreenOps strategy would be saying, how do we get the best return on investment through cloud? Because they are doing this stuff all the time. If you think a cloud provider isn't looking at how well they provision IT to provide services, their number one thing is how many transactions they can get per watt, because they need to be limiting their energy costs to provide the highest amount of transactions at the lowest cost. So a lot of cloud providers are well ahead of enterprise and colo in regards to the configuration of their equipment, but the enterprise itself has very little visibility on that.
Fantastic. Look, I think that takes us to about the end of the podcast. I wanted to thank you very much for all the insights and certainly knowledge of that area. Is there anywhere people can find more information and maybe reach out to you?
Yeah, the two places I would say is find out what we're talking about on LinkedIn. There's tons of information on there. And go to the Interact website at www.interactdc.com or drop us an email. All our research we open source, so everything to do with the actual academic research we provide, and we publish 2 or 3 times a year on key topics. It's all available, it's all free, and it's all downloadable at interactdc.com. So if you feel like nerding out on some of the science and some of the mathematical models and AI, go there and check it out, and then drop me a line if you want to know more.
That's fantastic. Rich, once again, thank you very much for coming on today and taking us through the IT side of data centers and its optimizations. On that note, for any of our listeners, if you have any more questions, please reach out to Rich. If you have any other topics that you'd like us to talk about or bring specialists on, please reach out to me directly at romain.truncheon@imasons.org, and we'll make sure to follow up. On that note, we are closing the podcast. Thank you, Rich, once again, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks very much. See you, everybody.